All right, I should be back. Can you guys see me?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, my laptop just decided to drop its connection for no reason, so we're used to that kind of thing. But thankfully, I got a quick recovery. So I'm not sure quite where you lost me, but in short, basically, I'm just going to be talking a bit about, when you work in a shell, a lot of times you work with PowerShell. There's these kind of nice things about like creature comforts in terms of like how you work with it that really end up mattering. Is that when you have certain context, you have certain visual cues, you're able to really be more productive than you would be otherwise. And so a lot of my presentation today is going to be about the new Windows terminal and how it addresses a lot of those items, as well as some prompt customization in general in terms of that world that you live in when you're working in PowerShell, how that ends up looking. Before I go too deep into that, though, let me see if I can bring up one other thing here real quick, just to segue from Thomas's speech. So, when you talk about developing things, like I don't consider myself a TypeScript developer. I consider myself like very terrible at it, but I have my own PowerShell extension out there. This is a very simple extension at this point. All it does is that what I really didn't like in VS Code was that it didn't highlight the function keyword correctly. So I just made a very small script that basically just appends to the syntax highlighter and makes it so that piece highlights. And that's all it does. It's a very simple extension, but you can download it. You can install it into VS Code, and a few other people like it, it looks like. So there's just an example of what that kind of looks like. So thanks, Thomas, for that presentation. That was really good. I assume you guys can still see me here. I got my monitor over here to make sure that I always have this over here as my fail-safe to make sure I've completely lost you. All right, so the new Windows terminal is available. It's still in preview, but it's getting very close to version 1.0. And what it provides is a much better experience than you've had than the old classic command line interface. One thing also to Barbara and such, if there's any questions that come up in the chat, feel free to interrupt me if I don't see them.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Great, thanks. Microsoft put out this cute little sort of hype video. This is from an earlier release. So some of this stuff like isn't real, but I think it's just kind of a fun video, and we'll see how well it works here with the optimized video on Zoom.
Style. I know how to run wild. Taking over the spotlight. I'm on a roll, ready for the show now. It's go time. Watch what I do. Watch what I do. I see you looking. Watch what I do. Oh my. Watch what I do.
All right, did you guys see that okay?
Yeah, we could see it. People are asking if they can get a link to this video.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, if you just Google, I think it's Windows Terminal Preview. It's out there. I mean, great job on the marketing department. Half the stuff you see in there never came to fruition, but it's still pretty cool to watch, right? One of the things, so in there you saw like a lot of the kind of general things, and I'll be going through a lot of what you saw in there, as well as a lot of new stuff that's come along since that sort of like hype video was put together. But I mean, one thing about Windows Terminal that's always really nice is that there are so many different ways you can implement and customize it. So these are all real Windows Terminal configurations that people have posted. And let me actually switch my optimization real quick. There we go, that's better. That should be a little more clear now. So these are all actual themes that people have used for it. And what it allows you to do is it adds a whole bunch of things over like the typical command line thing that you've had. It adds tabs, it adds ability to split windows, split panes. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen it or played around with it a bit. So what I'm going to show today is just some of the kind of more advanced kind of nifty things you can do with it, as well as, of course, a PowerShell module for configuring it. So I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time with slides. We're going straight to demo time. So bringing this guy up, this is the Windows terminal. And so this might be kind of dark. Okay, it looks like it comes up okay. So this is my personal Windows terminal. So you'll see a lot of stuff in here, which we'll go over pretty soon. But first, let's go ahead and just sort of reset this back to what you see at the factory defaults. This is my little demo script. So we're going to pick a demo here. We're going to do factory reset the Windows terminal. And every one of these demos, it's going to show you right before what I do, what it's going to do. So in this case, this is where your settings file lives. Kind of an obtuse path, but that's because it's implemented with the Microsoft Store. I guess to start with, if you've never used Windows Terminal, it's on the Microsoft Store. You just go to Microsoft Store, you search for Windows Terminal, and you do install, and it's there, and then you can use it. So this particular configuration file is what sets everything up. But I've got some customizations here, but let's start from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now it's deleted, and I'm just going to close my window and reopen it. And now this looks a little more basic. So what you see here is what you typically get with the Windows Terminal, minus my fancy prompt here, which I'll be talking about a little bit later, but for now I'll just make it normal again. So a lot of the features that you have here, you see you have tabs up here, and you can create new tabs and work with multiple different sessions, which is nice as opposed to having to mix a bunch of different windows. If you click this drop down, now this is the out-of-the-box configuration. I didn't do anything. I literally just deleted my configuration. So right out of the box, you can see it automatically detected PowerShell. It detected the CMD. It detected PowerShell 7. And what's interesting is my PowerShell 7 is installed using a tool called Scoop, which if you've heard of Chocolatey, Scoop is a tool like Chocolatey, but allows you to install software very quickly without admin rights in your local user folder. A lot like if you're used to like NPM tools or NPX, it's, if you're familiar with those terms from TypeScript, it's like that, but for all kinds of Windows programs. And it's also written completely in PowerShell. So I'm actually going to bring up that page real quick. One of my favorite tools that I feel like doesn't get enough talk about, but it's just scoop.sh, and it'll give you all the information, but it's just like an apt-get. And you can, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if you haven't seen Scoop, check it out. Super easy to install. Run that one command, and you can now start typing scoop install pwch, scoop install VS Code, scoop install .NET Framework, and it's great. It's super fast. Doesn't require admin rights. Anyhow, so that tangent aside, coming back to my terminal, it automatically detected this PowerShell that I have, and it's set up in that Scoop path. You can see here, C demo Scoop apps PowerShell. So I didn't do that. That's all part of Windows Terminal. It automatically just can automatically discover if you have PowerShell and add it. I also run Windows Subsystem for Linux on here, which lets, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's just basically a very lightweight way of running Linux systems in kind of a hypervisor virtual way. Very simple. So basically I have Alpine Linux here and Ubuntu Linux. And if I click Ubuntu, it comes right up. And so here I am in my Ubuntu. But as you can see here, I have my PowerShell on my local system, my Ubuntu right next to it, you know, on my little special file system here. I can also discover the Alpine, which I have, which Alpine Linux is like a very, very small, lightweight Linux that's used a lot in containers. And so I have that here. And also, this is Linux, but at the same time, you know, maybe not on this one because I haven't reset it, but Ubuntu should have it. No, I forgot I switched over my demo thing, so never mind that. Bad demo. I forgot to set that up on my demo thing, but PowerShell works just fine inside these Ubuntu and Linux systems that you have running on your local machine. But the nice thing is that you have just this nice consistent interface to all these different applications. And this also includes Azure Cloud Shell. So to do Azure Cloud Shell, you do this, you do your sign in, you log in, and it will just take you to your Azure Cloud Shell. If you're not familiar with what Azure Cloud Shell is, Azure Cloud Shell is a instance of PowerShell that runs inside of Azure and allows you to run commands and do all that kind of stuff out there. So typically to get to this, you're going to shell.azure.com and using it in a web browser, but here you can have it right there. So again, before, I haven't touched anything. This is the default config, which if you click here on settings, it'll come up. And so here we go. This is just the, let me get a bunch of my junk out of the way here. This is just the default settings. So this is what it automatically generates by default. So that's pretty cool. Like a lot of this stuff just works right out of the box. If you've worked with Windows Terminal in the past, a lot of this is new in some of the newer versions. Obviously, it's still under development, so a lot of new stuff is coming along pretty quick. And that's just a quick thing to show you that out of the box works pretty good. So let me just go ahead and get back to my basic terminal again. So here I am back to out of the box. I'm going to go back to my demo script here. And so one of the things I can do is I can restore my custom profile. And so I just have this file saved in a special place that has all my customizations added to it. And all I'm doing is copying it. Let me blow that up, make sure you guys can see it. All I'm doing is copying that configuration to this location, which is where that file is saved. So let's do that. Everything changed. Interesting. So this is one neat thing about Windows Terminal. When you change the settings, it updates the terminal in real time as you change the settings. So I just changed that, and look, now I got all these new options. They got fancy icons and colors. If I start a new terminal, oh look, I got this nice little pulsating icon down here. These are all my little customizations that I have in here. My PowerShell has a special theme with its special icon. If I go to that same Ubuntu you saw before, hey, it's got a nice special color here and a special icon. Alpine the same way. So this is just some of the customizations that you can add in the profile. So now let me go ahead and look at my profile again. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my demo script in my new fancy view now. You also notice all my icons are customized. I've added a bunch of custom icons here to make this look nice. And I also make it so I don't like seeing all the terminals. I like all my terminal icons real short because it's already kind of contextual with this icon. So I have some stuff in there to hide these tabs. And so let me go back to my demo script. And so let's go ahead and show what the default terminal settings are. And so all this is going to do, it's going to open up my Visual Studio Code and open up the default settings file, which is here. So this is the file that you can see if you want to see what the defaults are for a Windows Terminal before you change anything. This is where you go. The other way to get there is if you hold down, little secret sauce way to get there is if you hold down the Alt key and click Settings, that'll open it too. But we're just going to do it this way with the demo. And up comes my Visual Studio Code. And here's that file. So that's C, Windows Program Files, Windows Apps, Defaults. And so this shows some of the defaults, some of the default themes, default settings, default key bindings, default profiles. Again, these profiles which are kind of built in. Now you'll notice some of those ones like the WSL and such aren't automatically discovered, aren't in this default because those are discovered dynamically when you start Windows Terminal. But right here is where you can get all the ideas. Like it starts with 120 columns, 30 row characters. You know, do you want to show the tabs in the title bar? Again, if you want to know what some of the default settings are, you can always just come to this file and take a look. And again, I'm sorry if that's a little small. Blow it up a bit. Okay. So now that we have those, another thing we can do is look at how I've customized things. So this is
just a quick question in between. What JSON indent color tool are you using?
Oh, okay. So that is a PowerShell. That is a Visual Studio Code thing called Indent Rainbow. And if you ever work with like YAML, it's absolutely essential. Like I don't understand. Like my favorite was like Scott Hanselman went on a rant about how terrible YAML is, and honestly, you really just need to get this extension. It's called Indent Rainbow. And what we can do is at the end of the conversation when we get back to Q&A, I'm happy to go through like what my favorite extensions are. But that's this guy right here, Indent Rainbow. So what it does is and this works in PowerShell, it works in JSON, anything that indents, it automatically colorizes it. And you can customize these colors. It's all done in the settings. Really nice, really handy. And so that's what adds these colored indents.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got a million of things like that, but yeah, that is one of those, like there's a reason it has like 750,000 downloads is because it makes things super easy. So, and this is another thing I'm talking about with like Windows PowerShell and code is the environment that you work in can define your productivity just with these little creature comforts. I mean, that thing might just seem like a little thing or a nice thing, but that's probably saved me building Azure DevOps pipelines so many times because I had the thing off a little bit. It makes it so easy to line that up, makes it so easy to line up functions and make sure if you have a lot of nested functions with if-thens and try-catches and such, still to know where you are in that contextual hierarchy. Really helpful. It's just a very simple visual cue. And feel free to send me questions that send me off on tangents because I'll do it all the time. I can go any which way.
I will.
So so bringing back my custom terminal settings, I'm just going to go through a couple of them just to give you an idea of what's possible. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And let's go to Zen mode. If you don't know what Zen mode is in Visual Studio Code, you do this. Everything else goes away except for what you're seeing. In fact, what I can do is I can do screencast mode too. By the way, if you to bring this dialog up that you're seeing, it's just Control-Shift-P. If in Visual Studio Code, if there's no keyboard shortcut you learn, anything else, learn Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P on Mac. It is the most helpful shortcut because from here you can do everything else and find out what the commands are for everything as well. So anyhow, I'm going to go back and just do screencast mode. And what that does is that'll make it so you see when I click, it shows it. When I type, you see it show up down there at the bottom. Handy for doing presentations. So this is sort of my default thing. So one thing I have is like by default, Control-C doesn't copy in the terminals. It sends the command into the system to intercept it. So I add that just as a little creature comfort. There's a bunch of things like that you can do. So in the config, it's broken down into a couple different sections. You have profiles and schemes. And this is, yeah. So under profiles, you have your default settings. If you haven't worked with the Windows Terminal config lately, this is new, so that you actually can define defaults for all your profiles, and then your configs can just override them. So anybody who's been using Windows Terminal and hasn't seen this before, this is great, because your configs were a lot of repeat yourself of like all the settings that you want, all the settings that you want. Now I just have the same basic settings of the command line and the GUID that's different for each thing, and then I want this one to have a different icon, different name, different background image, but all these other settings, my font size, my font, my color scheme, my opacity, etc., those all stay consistent through everything else. I'm overriding the normal defaults and setting them here. Here's where I set that tab title to override that, as well as suppress the application title. So if an application wants to try to write to the terminal, it can't do it unless I specifically allow that for that particular application. So as you can see here, it's not that complicated. It's basically just, I have the default settings. One thing to note is that for the different types of those special profiles, like the auto-discovered profiles, they actually have specific GUIDs. If you go back to the defaults file, you'll see what they are. And so if you define your customizations on these specific GUIDs, it will tie to those auto-discovered profiles. So I have installed PowerShell 7 with Scoop, but if I had installed it just using the regular MSI or installed it using Chocolatey, because the discovery process finds it no matter where it is, my settings as I have set here will follow to that, which is pretty handy. And so in a couple different things here is like, here's PowerShell. No real customizations there except add no logo, because I hate that extra stuff that gets added there, especially, hey, you should use PowerShell 7. I'm like, I'm using PowerShell 7. You don't have to tell me. And change the color scheme. Here's another one. I just want to change the icon and change the background image and give it a name. So these are not complicated changes. I'm just making edits here. And I believe, I don't know if they'll make it for the 1.0 release, but at least for now, they will have probably a graphical editor for this. But for now, it's just going as you edit. Let's see, how am I doing on time? Doing pretty good. And then you have your schemes. So you have different customizations. So there's a lot of built-in themes that you can see in that default. This is a theme that I personally added. I really like just the default Visual Studio Code dark theme. I actually think it's really nice. I like the colors. And so I made a theme for it that basically matches up the colors so that what you use in the VS Code terminal, you see in the PowerShell terminal. So a good example of this is so you can see some of the syntax highlighting here, but if I take the same thing and do it in Windows PowerShell, it has a little bit more of that kind of default, what you're used to at the normal command line terminal. And that's just because I chose that theme for this. But it ties into these different colors and just does it based on your preferences. So you can customize all that. I like mine to look like my VS Code does. So if I have that, and I bring up the integrated terminal, get out of Zen mode here real quick. And it's not perfect because PSReadline and the two are a little bit different, but you can see that all the colors work pretty much the same. So I like that. Again, I like that consistency when I'm looking at code, whether I'm working in terminal or code, I'm able to see and be used to my commands, be used to my colors. And again, there's another thing where context matters, is that it highlights these words so that if I make a typo, it's immediate, a lot of the times it's immediately obvious, like if function isn't correct. If it's not fully typed out, oh, maybe I didn't type it all the way and it's going to fail on me. So those little visual cues and all that kind of stuff help you write that better code and help you to get things right the first time. All right, so let's look into a couple of the things that I've added to the default configuration. So one thing we have here, we have kind of these defaults. We have a thing for PowerShell remoting. I don't have a Windows system to go into with this because I just changed this, but actually this might work on my, I don't know if I reset this up or not. Let's try it. Let's do it for fun. Let's yellow this. I doubt it's going to work, but okay, good, it worked. So this, so what I did there was that I made a shortcut, and all this does is call a. Let's pull up the settings again. All this does is just call a PowerShell script to kind of help facilitate that login process. Let me zoom out here. So that is. Where are you? Okay, here he is. So this is that Windows remoting PowerShell. And let me take this and pull it out and just kind of show you what it looks like. So all this does is that the command line is just calling PowerShell 7 and adding a little extra stuff here and basically just putting nice little one-liner that sets the Windows terminal profile name. This is used for some of my later things that I do. This is something that they're going to fix in the next release, but for now I kind of have to have this workaround. But all it does is basically it calls read host and brings up that prompt that you saw, and then does a connect PowerShell session using that host name, and then waiting a little bit just to prompt it. So again, just a real simple script, nothing fancy, just a little one-liner, but it facilitates doing this PowerShell remoting to another system. And one thing that you'll probably notice here is that I'm just going to show something here. This is on Linux. This is a Linux virtual machine that I have, or it's a hosted server. But this is PowerShell, and I'm actually using PowerShell remoting to Linux over SSH. This is some new PowerShell 7 type stuff. I'm not going to be able to go in too much here, but if we get into the chat and you want to see more about this, it's really nice because now I'm just able to basically SSH in my systems, but do it over PowerShell remoting. So I can also do all the stuff they're used to with PowerShell remoting. Like I can import the commands from my local remote Linux server, run them on my local system, and have them run as if they're on the remote system. All that kind of fancy
Justin,
stuff. Yeah.
One question, because everyone is viewing it on their monitors. It's quite big, so if you wouldn't mind zooming out a little bit in VS Code.
Sure. I always defer to being super big, so as long as everybody's got nice monitors, I can zoom it out.
Thank you very much.
Sometimes people are watching on their phones and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, what is that? I can't. What? Who?" So that should be a little. Is everybody okay with that view? Just call out and say if it's too small. Otherwise, I'm going to assume it's good.
This is good.
Okay, great. Well, that'll make my sort of presenting a little bit easier then. So we'll go back. So that's just one example of a connection. Another thing you can do is just doing regular SSH, which to various systems, and all this. The way I have this set up, like it uses the Windows version of SSH, which now you can get, and it supports SSH authentication, supports Kerberos authentication to Windows servers. Pretty nice. But again, this is just another case of another simple PowerShell script that just reads the host and just starts an SSH session. You know, again, nothing fancy, but really handy and really convenient when you just want to go and connect to one of those things. The rest of this is mostly just cleanup. So I have this nice little acrylic view, which is kind of hard to see, but you can see my background here, and you'll see it does this nice kind of semi-transparent thing. It looks really ugly on the Zoom, but it's really nice in person when you're doing it in high res. But I have another version I usually use for demos where it's like a flat background. So like if you watch my Twitter and when I do those little like GIF screencasts of little things that I'm doing, I'm usually using this mode so that it's a flat background, it's easier to view, and it looks a lot cleaner. And the rest of these are basically just customizations on the coloring and the highlighting syntax and whatnot. But you know, it's really nice, and so you have that all in there. And the custom icons are really nice because they really help you kind of distinguish what you're working on. All right, so that's a lot of the kind of visual aspects of this. And then there's all kinds of shortcuts in terms of splitting panes. I should show that here real quick. For some reason, they changed it, and I don't have my default remember. Give me 1 second here. Oh, that's right. So one other thing it supports is it supports having multiple panes in the same window. So what I did there was just Alt-Shift minus, and it splits the terminal and gives me multiple terminals. And so you can have, you know, if you have like a watching function, if you're doing like a GC wait, you can have it there, work on it up here, and then as the contents change, it'll automatically update down here. Or you can be remoted into another system at the same time. I don't have my SSH key set up on this demo account. So you know, you can be working in multiple areas on multiple panes, and Alt-Shift plus will split it to the right. So you can just keep splitting this as much as you want, just to get really into it if you're getting crazy about it. But that's really useful if you're used to doing things in like VS Code where you're like editing in one and doing another. You could start a process or start a container and have it wait for the debugger and then go into the debugger on the other one. So if I do an Alt-Shift equals, there's my split to the other side. And I have, you know, side by side, and then another one down here. So that's really handy. That's fairly new in some of the things, and that keyboard shortcut is just Alt-Shift minus and Alt-Shift equals. But this is also everything about those keyboard shortcuts is all configurable in that config file. So let's start a new guy here. And yes, I know my prompt is fancy. Yes, I will talk about that in just a little bit. So let's go ahead and start back up my little demo script. Okay, so we've seen those. The custom icons, you can save in a special place. So I'm just going to show here just for Explorer. There's just a special location that they are stored. And this is just going to bring up my Windows Explorer. And this is just a nice folder. The nice thing about this folder is that it persists between Windows Terminal upgrades. So if you put them in here, this is just a Windows app packaging quirk, is that by putting things here in this roaming state, you can refer to them using those roaming state statements. Let's see if I bring up the config here. So you see here, like the path to this is this special path configuration, MS app data roaming SSH. But that way, what's nice is that I can write my config once, and it will work as long as those icons are in that folder. And as I upgrade Windows Terminal versions, move it to other systems, that kind of thing, this all stays persistent, makes it pretty easy to keep and work with. Okay, so the next item we have here is, one thing we can do is we can detect the current terminal profile. So this is using this module, which you see me loading here in the background, which is MS Terminal Settings. This was a module done by Chris Duck. He was really early getting that on, and it was really great. And it's a really great module for manipulating, adding things, customizing your console using PowerShell. What I have here is a new custom version, which I'll talk about a little bit, that actually uses code generation off of the JSON schema that Windows Terminal provides to generate these commands and generate all the parameter completions and everything. and type completions automatically. So a lot of the talk we were talking about earlier about the pain of like you spend most of your time writing parameter completers and validations and that kind of stuff. I'll show a little bit about how that works and how this gets generated so that I don't have to do any of that. And as the Windows terminal schema updates, this PowerShell module will automatically update with the latest and greatest settings and whatever validation has been defined within the schema that they use to validate it. One side on that schema validation thing, as long as you have this line at the top of your configuration, Visual Studio Code will automatically pull in that schema and do IntelliSense for you. So I can do you can see if I do a quote, it's already IntelliSensing all the different options that I can do in this config. And I can also do control space and get that. And also it determines errors based on those, like if I do not a real key, it can know that that's not a correct token and show up and let you know that. Let me make an actual key just to make that show that that's really true there. So that's really nice. And so if you're working with this directly, you get all the same IntelliSense on these things, including things like, if you go to things that have different variables like background image stretch mode, it'll automatically complete the different options for you. So this all comes out of the JSON schema that is defined here. And if you just go here, you'll see the JSON file. You don't need to know a lot about it. It's just simply that it's a way to automatically validate a JSON file looks the way that it needs to. Discard my changes. Okay, so one neat thing here is that we can use this module here to do things like detect the current profile. So here's one where I can do this, and all I'm going to do is get MS terminal profile name PowerShell. This typically will actually automatically detect what your current, like if you're running it inside a Windows PowerShell session, it can automatically detect which one you're in. But that code is a little janky right now because of something that the Windows terminal team needs to fix. The next release it'll work better. So for now, I'm manually specifying the terminal. And so here's my nice object that came back. And it has some nice formatting, so it doesn't come back as like a big ugly, even though this is basically a JSON representation, it comes back with some nice formatting. So my profile, PowerShell, command line, and these things, and set it to this global my profile parameter. Great. So if I look at that my profile, there's my profile. If I format it list, I can see all those same properties that you saw in the JSON as well as all the different options. I'm going to take this one step further and go to get member. So this is actually has its own class. Now I didn't write this class. I used a tool called QuickType, which will take a JSON schema or a JSON and automatically generate C# code and types for it. It's really cool. And so this is a type that just automatically got detected, and it has all these, and it also includes all kinds of, for the properties, special properties for those. So if I want to, say, try to change the background image alignment to not a real alignment, you see how it told me that this isn't correct, that you didn't use a correct setting? Again, I didn't write any of that. It's all built into that schema and the things that came through. I didn't have to write any of the validation for that. And we'll be able to take this and pass it through the actual commands, which I'll show in a bit. So great. So now I have my profile, an item that represents my current profile. Well, let's do something neat with that. And actually, so I don't have to go back and forth, let me bring my demo script back up again. So, going to detect my profile again. So you remember earlier when I applied my configuration that it updated in real time. Well, that's one of the nice things is you can go ahead and do these, make changes to your terminals in real time, and the terminal will automatically update it. So I'm going to change my terminal background color to red for 5 seconds. And so this is all it's going to do. It's going to take my profile and then pipe it to this command, set MS terminal profile, and change it to this HTML color of red. Do it for 5 seconds and then change it back. Hey, look at that, it changed to red. Wait about 5 seconds, and it changed back. So so that's gives you some of the ideas of some of the really cool dynamic stuff you can do with this. Is that you can have terminal, you can have parts of your profile and such that if an I don't think I have it rigged. I would have to switch over to my other one. I don't have it rigged up here, but if you've followed my Twitter, you've seen my demos where if a program throws an exception, it'll play a little nuclear bomb GIF in the background. I can't demo that today. I'll have to probably find the GIF towards the end to show it. Fortunately, there's a little piece of that that's broken with the latest terminal code, and I didn't get a chance to fix it before this demo, but I will post back to the group a demo of what that looks like, and it's part of this. But here's another example, is that if I want to increase the font size for 5 seconds, same deal. I'm just going to set the terminal profile to the font size and then change it back. Get ready, it's going to blow. Blows up the font size, waits 5 seconds, takes it back down. So those are fun things to do, but you can see things where you can dynamically add profiles to this based on conditions in your environment. That's part of your PowerShell script, maybe part of your PowerShell profile. Automatically generate, if you have some quick links that you go to out of your SSH profile, you could just automatically generate profiles that's like SSH- my fancy server 1, my fancy server 2, based on the conditions of your environment. And like it will do that, say, on your local machine. If those systems aren't present, or you're not on your domain, maybe don't generate those automatically. So that's just some ideas of some of the power that you can do with this module. And all this module is doing is it's literally just taking the JSON file, reading it, doing some fancy stuff, and then saving the JSON back. You can do the same things manually in code. So if I go and I open my settings file again, I'm going to push this to the left and bring this to the right. So if I want to change one of these settings, so here's like my defaults. My default color scheme is dark plus. Maybe I don't want that to be my default. I just want whatever the system has. So I save that, and now it's changed to whatever default color scheme is of the system. Delete it back and hit save again, changes it back. Maybe I want to change the font size on the fly here. Oh, I have a custom font size on this, I think. So change the font size here, blows it up. So you can edit this file directly as you go and immediately see your changes, which makes it really nice for testing and customizing new profiles. At least until you screw it up like I just did. Forgot a 0. So that's pretty neat. Like you can do that, change the icons, change the background images. I think let's see, where's that Star Trek image I got? I can make that my video background, just copy that real quick. One thing about the JSON is /escapes, so I have to redo those real quick. And there you go, got that as my background now. So the way that, like for instance, if you've seen my demos of Invoke Terminal GIF, all that does is temporarily change this setting and then change it back, but it looks like it's playing something in the background on the system. Do that, and so now it's back to normal. Okay, so let's see, what else can we do that I don't have broken? So this one's currently broken, but I can do it again. But one thing is that if you go to this website with the iTerm color schemes, there's a folder here for Windows Terminal, and in here is all the different themes that are in this package in Windows Terminal format. So you can take every one of these themes and paste it in here, and you have the theme. So I'll post a new video that'll show this demo. But basically, if you run this, it goes through, and my terminal just goes all kinds of crazy colors as it cycles through all the different themes that are available on that site. And again, all it's doing, I'll show you what the code normally looks like. Normally, it reads in these files, takes the current config, backs it up, and then sleeps. And then for each thing, just takes it, writes it into the config, and then sleeps, and then just rotates through them all really quickly. So let's see if my ligatures demo still works. Yep, okay. I don't know if this will work. Let's see if it works. Nope, it didn't work. I know why that doesn't work, and I can fix that later. But anyhow, what this demo shows is changing the font. So the font that I'm using is a font called, one of the things that they released with Windows Terminal was a new font called Cascadia Code, which I like a lot. But it doesn't include a lot of the power line symbols and the stuff that you use to make, like, if you see my fancy prompt, it doesn't include a lot of stuff that does that. So if you go to, there's this nice site called Nerd Fonts that actually takes normal fonts and patches them in. So if you go to nerdfonts.com, they have all these different icons. So they take all these and patch them into normal fonts that you're used to. And so one of them that they patch is the new Cascadia Code, which I really like. But due to copyright issues, they obviously can't call it that. So now it's called Cascadia Cove. And so I have that here. I set that here. And so if I take off this font face, it should go to my system default. And so you can see all these are normal actions. If I turn this font face back on, watch very closely at these icons up here. So once I hit save, you'll notice they've kind of changed formats. Notice they have this, these are what are called ligatures, which is basically, it's still the same characters, but it's formatting them in kind of a nicer way. So these greater than or equal tos, multiple stars, not equal. It lets you know that these are like programming specific characters. And so it's really nice. It really makes the code look really nice. Like if you're doing something like, this does not equal that, it makes it look really nice, as opposed to, you know, the equal exclamation mark. It's a little bit easier to read, but it's still just those characters. It's just reformatting them. You know, I delete it here, I delete it there, I copy and paste it to Notepad, and it's still all the same characters. It's just the font is interpreting those. So those are called ligatures. You can enable them in both Windows Terminal and VS Code. All right, so I think that covers a lot of the main things of Windows Terminal. Again, the big things is that it's very powerful to configure in the JSON, and you can really make it sort of your hub to replace your typical sort of command line experience. So, you know, like if I bring this up, and you know, it's a significant upgrade over, you know, your basic Windows PowerShell terminal. And even this is, I customized my PowerShell terminal a little bit, but it has that Cascadia font and everything. So definitely really great. Check it out. It is Windows only, unfortunately, but you know, it is a really handy thing to really get you if you're used to things like Xterm and a lot of the really fancy terminal programs that are available. If you've used like cmdlets or any of the other kind of Windows-based fancy terminal programs, it's definitely worth checking out. I really like it. It's very fast. It's very intuitive. Has a very nice, you can get it to look very nice and aesthetic, and extremely customizable. Like I said, all the different keyboard shortcuts. There's a huge amount of them. Very useful. So I guess I'll open up the floor for any quick questions on Windows Terminal before I move on to how I make my prompt so fancy.
Okay.
Where did you get the settings for? I see the JSON where you set your settings for the terminal.
In terms of like all this special customization?
Yeah, you showed how you can edit the name or the icon, but are there any examples anywhere else? How did you make up all of this?
A lot of it was, some of it's trial and error. A lot of it's on. So there is a the whole thing is documented in terms of all the settings. You just Google like Windows Terminal JSON. Yeah, so Windows Terminal JSON reference. If you Google that, you'll get this document, and it explains all the different settings. The other nice thing too is, again, if you do it in VS Code, because of that JSON schema completer, it'll auto-complete this stuff, so you can kind of hand discover it. But it has all the detail about the settings, how the settings work, how you do the customization, some examples. And again, because it is still in rapid development, some of the stuff's not fully documented, but you're able to play with it. And so a lot of this, there's great examples. Like I think Scott Hanselman has a good Windows Terminal customization article. There's lots of great videos on it. Yeah, so he shows some examples that he did. There's a cool like retro matrix effect that they very recently added that's experimental. But yeah, a lot of this, like my profile is a lot of trial and error, getting it how I want it. And I do have a script that will, like for what you see here, if you like how mine is set up, there's a script that I have that will automatically download, install, and set you up the way that it is. I don't know if it's in my demo links here. No, I don't have it in here, but I'll add it and get it out after the presentation. But yeah, a lot of it's just customization, trial and error, play with them, try it, get it how you like it, and then like take my examples and then change them. You don't like my background colors, you don't like my themes, change them. That's what's great about it. It's super customizable, just like Visual Studio Code. Does that answer your question? And so
Yes, thanks.
The other way too is the quick way to get to the editing is when you have Windows Terminal up, the simplest thing to do, because the files are in kind of obtuse locations, they're not like just on your, is just go here and click Settings. And if you want to see the global defaults, just hold down Alt and then click Settings. But typically, you'll just click Settings here, and it just, if you don't have it, your JSON, like I have my JSON set up, so if it opens a JSON file, it opens it in VS Code. If you don't have that set up, this will open in Notepad, but you can change it. But you can see if you just click that, it just opens it, and then you can just go in here and start screwing with it. That's all you got to do, is just click the down arrow and choose Settings. And again, as you make changes, all you got to do is hit Save, and you'll immediately see your changes in the window here. And if you screw something up, if I take this and screw it up, well, it broke my, maybe that was the wrong kind of screw up. Let's change this to the wrong kind of background image alignment. So the thing's pretty forgiving a lot of the time. If you make changes that don't work, it'll just pass through the failed setting. But if something like the schema is screwed up, that should do it. There you go. So it'll let you know exactly where you screwed up your config, which is kind of nice as you're going through it and trying to get it to work. And if you screw it up, it'll just fall back to either the settings you already have or go back to the default settings. So it's really intelligently built. Any other questions on that? Or Windows Terminal in general before I go to the prompt stuff?
Yeah, I got one question.
Sure.
How do I open a new tab as in admin mode?
So because of the way that Windows works, there's no way to like do a new tab in admin mode. So what normally you'll do is you'll just do Control-Shift-click it, and then that'll fire up. I'm getting my admin prompt here. Doesn't help that I have my caps lock on for some weird reason. I must have bumped it. And so now I have a new terminal. In fact, you'll see it has administrator. So typically,
okay.
The way I usually work is Control-Shift-click, and then I have a separate terminal for my normal work and a terminal for my administrator. And I don't know if I had a part of my, it's not here anymore, but I had a part of my profile that if I'm working in administrator mode, it puts a big giant red background on it with big flashing exclamation mark in the lower right-hand corner so that I know that I'm using a terminal that's in admin mode versus a regular one. So yeah, this is a limitation in Windows because a non-admin process can't start an admin process and still have it hosted within the same process. That's a security thing that was done back in Vista and has always been the thing. So that's just something that unless they re-architect Windows 10 to allow that kind of thing, which opens up all kinds of privilege escalation possibilities, it's just not going to happen. But so the easy workaround is typically you just do two separate ones, one for admin, one not. And you just come down here, and the quick shortcut is that wherever you have it, you just hold down Control-Shift as you click it, and that'll start a new admin session. And if you have your UAC turned off, it'll just come up. It won't do this.
Awesome, thanks.
Like, yeah, it works pretty good. Like, you know, it hasn't bothered me that much. Yeah, I would like to have it. You know, what you can do is you can always set your shortcut to always run as administrator, and then you don't have to worry about it. But that comes with its own caveats.
Yeah,
but,
no,
you know,
it would be fun if you could just push the drop-down menu and then select, right-click, select Windows Administrator or something.
Yeah, I mean, there is kind of a way to do that in that I had a profile that you would click it and it would say launching as administrator, and then it would start process a new one based on that profile, but it would still be a new window kind of a thing. So like that was a thing, and I did used to do that, but I ended up just being like, you know what, just Control-Shift-click this is easy enough for me. Plus it also lets me know that I'm being deliberate, is that like I want to do something as admin, I have to Control-Shift-click to do that. And it's not that much more of an extra step that it's super inconvenient, but it's enough to let me know that I'm doing something different. Plus most of the time, this is my demo account, which doesn't have everything set up for my main work account. But typically on my developer account, when this comes up, this is all like red with all kinds of you are working in admin mode, you're going to screw stuff up.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I was disappointed in that too, but it is what it is, and it's the right decision ultimately. But yeah, it unfortunately is that limitation. Okay, so I'll go ahead and move on to the profile stuff. I'm going to do one last thing on the terminal settings program that I have. So I said earlier that I would talk about doing automatic parameter validation. So let me go ahead and open up this. This is a beta of the MS terminal setting module that I've been working on. It's kind of a complete refactor. So the way that this works is there's this site, and you don't have to use the site. There's also a command line thing, but I just use the site because it's easy. There is a site, if I go to my source, this thing, the site called QuickType, and this is super rad. I only found out about this like a month ago, but man, has it really accelerated my module development type stuff. So if you have any kind of JSON, it doesn't have to just be a schema, it can just be JSON. It can take that and convert it into types for any one of these languages, Python, Dart, Elm, Go, Java. It'll generate types that conform to that format. And so one of them is C#. And so one of the nice things about the C# here is that what it'll also do is if you choose complete, it'll add in all the stuff to convert to and from JSON using Newtonsoft JSON. So all that this is here, I didn't write any of this. This is like, what, 2,800 lines of code? All I did was take this JSON schema, copy it, paste it into here, and I have it generated these C# types. I'm not that great at C#. I know barely enough to be dangerous and just what I need to know about .NET concepts to work in PowerShell, but it just generated all this. And so I take this, save it here as a CS file, and part of my loading is just to, let's actually have it abstracted here. Part of the loading is just to simply add type that assembly. And so that loads it and adds it as a PowerShell type. So let me take this config. And so now it actually dynamically compiled that C# file and added it to my thing. So now I have this new namespace, Windows Terminal, dot. And so now I have these types that I can work with. Well, maybe not that one because I'm using the wrong generator, but. Sorry, now I remember. Windows Terminal is my namespace, dot terminal settings. So now I have types that is based on all the terminal settings stuff that works just like a PowerShell object. So like, you're used to types. You can, again, these are C# types, but everything in PowerShell is a C# type. So you're able to work with them just like you're used to working with different kinds of objects. Working with JSON, working with lists, working with hash tables, working with PS custom objects. It did all that. And so what this does is it just creates these types that front end all the JSON and can read and remove from them. So what that lets me do is do some really cool stuff. So now that I have these generated types, I can do things called dynamic parameters. If you're not familiar with dynamic parameters in PowerShell, it basically is this special block that you put in that lets you programmatically add parameters to a command when the command is started or when the command is called. So what this does is I've abstracted this out to this program called Get Object Dynamic Parameters. And in that is this thing here. And this is just a general abstraction that what it does is, given a type, it'll read the properties on that type. So if I take like this terminal settings type, let me Zen mode this out a bit. Oops, broke my program. Declare properties. By the way, if you don't know, PowerShell 7 supports outgrid view again, which is great. So I have this, and so all the profiles, again, I didn't write any of this. These are just the profiles that are on this type that came from that JSON setting that I imported using that QuickType. All these types are here, so I can take these types and loop through them. and say for each of these types, generate, this is all doing some .NET stuff. If you read any article on dynamic parameter generation, it'll have all this example. My example is very truncated. I do a bunch of fancy PowerShell 5.1 and up stuff to make this a lot shorter. Then a lot of examples you'll see will be a lot longer than this. I'm just sort of truncating things a bit. But basically, I'm just looping through these properties. As I'm saying, for these properties, for every one of these properties, if I've said that I want it to be mandatory, it'll make it mandatory. And if it's a Boolean prop, like if the value of the thing is Boolean, make it a switch, because I like switches more on things. I don't like to do dash this colon false. I just want to do dash the thing if I want it true, and then dash that colon false if I don't want it to be. So this just converts some of the properties to switches. And then it goes through, takes all those parameters, converts them to attributes, and then builds a dynamic parameter block out of them, which I originally defined up here, an attribute collection, and then a runtime defined parameter dictionary, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a list of parameters that are defined at runtime, and then return it. So that's just a fancy abstraction to make this part of the code really easy. So like if you don't want to understand any of that, you don't have to. All you got to do is take your type, and I have like my new MS Terminal profile, and just put this one line in here, is that I want the type for this type, Windows Terminal profile list, and I want name to be a mandatory parameter. I don't make GUID a mandatory parameter because what I have is that's an optional parameter. If you don't specify a GUID, my program just automatically generates a GUID for you. But this is the code to make a new MS Terminal profile. It's just these 4 lines. And all it does is just use that same type. So let's try this. Do a new MS Terminal profile. And of course, it's all going to break. But yeah, that's not going to work. Let me do a new MS Terminal settings as a better example. Let me do get MS Terminal settings as a better example. Get MS Terminal profile. Everything broke. Oh, I know why it broke. It's because I'm doing this in 7. And also because my config, I was screwing with it. So let me restore that. Let's do some on-the-fly demo god wizardry here. Restore my profile. There we go. Everything's happy again. Let's try that again. There we go. And so, but again, because I'm using strong types, it realized that my background image alignment that's in my config is incorrect. And so that's why it didn't import it. Again, didn't write any of that. It just works based because of the strong types that were generated from the JSON schema. So here's my get MS Terminal profile by default. Again, let me go to get MS Terminal profile. The only parameter I've defined here is default. Because it was get MS Terminal setting if you want to get it there. And the get MS Terminal setting just pulls in whatever the terminal setting is, that's your default thing. So get MS Terminal profile gives me this nice view. And for this view, I generated a format. There's a nice command for generating formats, but that's why it looks that way as opposed to looking like that. This is what it looks like by default if you don't add the format. Not as friendly, obviously. And you can also put it into outgrid view and get this nice view of it, as well as so here's my profiles in a nice view. Again, all those profiles that are in my config, each one of these is there. So let's take a look at some of these parameters. So again, if you look at my item here, let me reset my zoom here because I'm used to working on this much smaller. Is that still legible for everybody? Looks fine to me over there.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, sorry, I was making sure I didn't disconnect again. So I know I'm jumping around here a bit, so just tell me to go back if I go over something a little too fast. So here's my get MS Terminal profile. And again, the only parameter I have here is this default one, where if I want to get the default profile, if I do dash default, this gets my defaults versus the specialized profiles I have. So again, so if you look at this command, it should just have default and terminal settings as parameters if you're used to it. But I have this dynamic parameter which adds it. So if I do get MS Terminal profile, look at all these different options I have. I can now filter on any one of these parameters. And so I just pull, the way that filter works is I just pull from the parameters that came from dynamic and just filter on them. It's a very simple filter. It's just if the property matches it, then filter through with the wheres. Profile where this item matches that. Real simple. And it supports, I did as a like match, so you can use wildcards. So let's do an example. Get profile name PowerShell. So all that filtering and validation, all that kind of stuff, didn't do any of it. It's all just done with all this dynamic generation. If I want to do, let's do star PowerShell star. And now I get those ones. How about get MS terminal profile where, dash command line SSH. And now I just get my terminals that have the SSH in the command line. So all that power, all that filtering, any of that kind of filtering items that you would normally have, all just done for you automatically. Because it pulls in types, something like if I want to do background image, or what is it, background image alignment. So I'm going to hit tab. Let me make sure my screencast is on so you can see that. Look at that, auto completion. I didn't write an argument completer for that because it's an enum that came in from the type. It from the JSON schema that the Windows terminal people wrote that said these are the valid types. All that comes all the way through. And again, I didn't have to do anything for that. I didn't write a validate list for this. It all comes in from that type. So same thing with the set. So let's do get MS terminal profile PowerShell. I haven't added the positionals yet, so normally that positional will work. So this is my default PowerShell terminal thing. And so let's do a setting on this. So I have this, pipe it to set-ms terminal profile. So again, these parameters, if I go to set ms terminal profile, not a lot of code here, is that it's that same sort of basic thing which allows me to pipe in the profile. And again, the profile can be strongly typed. That type, again, came from the quick type generator. I didn't write that type. I didn't make a PowerShell class for this type. It was all generated for me, as well as all the parameters for it. And so now I want to get dynamic. I want to get all the properties of a profile list and make those available parameters. And again, this script simply just says, for every parameter that I specified, go ahead and change the setting on that profile and then save it. So that's what it does. So if I go take this and whoops. Say bottom. I think bottom right I have to do. Well, you saw it change earlier. I got something here, but
you've got a typo in the word PowerShell. You're missing the R.
See, that's why I got you here. And the reason that happens is I didn't quite get this all the way to validate not null or empty. It should have thrown an error on that, but again, I just wrote this yesterday, so there we go.
Oh man, you're good. I mean, we're loving this already. So you're
thanks. Yeah,
you're doing great.
Thanks for the call on it. So again, here, power autocomplete here, bottom left, bottom right, etc. And see how it's moving where my little icon is based on that background image. If I want to hide a profile, again, because that's a switch, you can do just dash hidden. Now it's like, hey, where'd my profile go? Now it's gone. Now maybe I want to make it hidden false. And it's back. So all that's just basically a front end to a JSON file. It's just all this PowerShell module is doing is what you saw me doing in VS Code earlier, which is editing the JSON file and saving it. But it puts all kinds of structures and types and all that around it, but with very minimal code. Like if you look at the original code of this, all of these parameters were parameter background image opacity, acrylic, max duration, all that kind of stuff. And also because I'm using the dynamic parameters and they're not conditional, if I do help get MS terminal profile, all the parameters are there with their help. as well as those special types that they needed to be. And it is actually possible to include, like if you have comment-based help, the types that got generated in the JSON schema, they are all documented. So I'll show you something here in that JSON schema again. I know that this is probably like a whole separate talk, but it's pretty neat, and I'll probably do a separate thing on it. So in the JSON schema, you see here that they define descriptions here for all these. So while I haven't written it yet, in my dynamic parameter thing, I could simply add to the attribute the comment-based help and parse this out and put it in there. And if I did that, then in this, where'd it go? Here it is. In my help, it would have the help here that is defined in the JSON schema here. So I didn't get that far yet because I wrote this in like 4 hours yesterday, but it's pretty cool how you can really generate a lot of that stuff out. So that's covering that PowerShell module. And again, all this, like the save, so the get and the save is when I'm getting get, it's just simply running this special thing that the QuickType auto-generated for me, which is do terminal settings, read it from JSON and the content. And so this actually works if you want to read a PowerShell, if you want to read in a profile that somebody wrote online. I added functionality so that you can actually specify a URL to it, pull that in, make some changes to it, save it, and you have a very quick way to like take somebody's config that they already wrote, customize it for yourself, and then save it just by doing get MS terminal setting, putting in the URL, pipe it to set MS terminal setting or profile, whatever, and then piping that back out to save. And the save is the same thing. Save is just save MS terminal setting, and the save is just where'd it go? Save MS terminal setting, wrong one. It's just this special property. This is in the namespace, so it makes it this namespace Windows Terminal .serialize, and it has this special static method to JSON that is just the objects. And so rather than me having to do convert to JSON, check the types, check that all that's correct, it does all the work using the Newtonsoft JSON library. I don't have to do any of that. I have to make sure the types are right. And if something's screwed up, if somebody changed the type or anything like that, it's all strongly typed. So when you do this, it'll error, and it'll show you exactly the error line or the profile where the issue is. And all that, it's like, you know how we always harp on people to use cmdlet binding because you get all kinds of stuff for free? That's what is really amazing about this QuickType thing, is you get all this stuff for free by wrapping around any JSON file. If you have a YAML file, YAML is valid JSON. You can take YAML, convert it to JSON, feed it into this tool, and get types out of it. So I'm doing this for this configuration, but picture any API, anything that you have a JSON file that you need to manipulate, save, and post, you can get the types without an SDK. So this is a great starting point for building any kind of module, APIs, etc. So with that, I know I'm running a bit long here. Any other questions on that kind of quick ones? Obviously, this warrants a whole separate thing, but I just want to show that's how this MS terminal settings thing works. All it does is open a JSON file, edit it, and save it. But it builds a lot of structure around it based on the schema that the Microsoft Terminal people provided that it's here. And if they add new features, when they added that new experimental, I think it's, what is it, set MS terminal profile. I think it's -use experimental. Or maybe it's -experimental. Yeah, so experimental retro terminal effect. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but just get a bunch of crap in here just to show it. Oh, sorry, off screen. Get MS terminal profile. Make sure I don't typo it this time. So now it adds this kind of, it's kind of hard to see on the thing, but it adds this special retro terminal effect to it. And I didn't have to write anything forward to that. I didn't have to add a parameter. I just refresh the schema and then refresh the QuickType. And then all that dynamic parameter generation that happens on these other commands, it all just flows through. So now it's available as a new parameter. And generation of these types, I think it's called like script utilities. There's a PowerShell script utility that makes it really easy to take a type and then pipe it to a command that'll basically auto-generate this for you, because this is a pain. I hate this format so much. It's so stupid, but there's a tool that you can use to really make it a lot easier. And this is what makes it so that when I do that get MS terminal profile, if you're not familiar with PowerShell types, is that's because I don't have it imported over there. That's what gives it this nice pretty print view, as opposed to like a typical object is just these things being defined up here. Oh, I didn't actually show the terminal settings since now that works. So by default setting, I think, because we don't do plurals. I harp people all the time, and then I do it myself. We don't do plurals in our commandlets. So this is like what the default object looks like. Not super easy to read, but it's all there. The path, the profiles, the schemes, my special color scheme that's in there. And you can browse this like an object. But I wanted a custom type where when I get it, I just want to see a nice summary. How many profiles are in it, how many key bindings, how many color schemes, and where it's at. So that's one of the nice things, again, just customizing that type format in PowerShell. Okay, I've hammered enough on this, but I'll probably make this.
One question: what kind of tool do you use to make the type format?
It's a PowerShell module that somebody wrote a really nice script for, and I will have it in the notes. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I know it's like what I googled was like it was PowerShell types easy, I think, and I found it.
Yeah, because I just do it like a barbarian. I just copy paste existing.
And I did too. Here we go. PowerShell format files the easy way. This is it. So this, I think Jeff Hicks, this is his blog, and so he has a module, yeah, PS script tools, new PS format XML. So what you literally do is you can just take your type and pipe it to that, and then add in all the custom parameters you need, like if you want which properties you want to have it viewed, and what kind of view you want it to be, a table, etc. And then it just spits out this for what you need. Very helpful, very handy.
Thank you.
Again, I'll include this in my post presentation links. So one other thing I want to show a terminal that I didn't get, Joel did a kind of a nifty thing here. So in the similar vein of like my throwing a bomb when you have a terminal GIF, he did this nifty thing where setting the title to an emoji that's the current weather. So based on the current weather and have it automatically update with an event, automatically have your terminal always show what the current weather is. That's pretty cool. The thing I'm going to do with this and adjust it is that one thing that I hate is when I have to do like Azure DevOps builds over and over and over again, waiting for it to complete, is watching it. So I'm going to add a thing where when I kick off an Azure DevOps build, have it show me the status of the build or my GitHub checks or my pull request check, and have it update here and show me a check mark or X, so that I can go off and work on something else and then see, oh, okay, now I got to go check that thing. As well as maybe have it in your prompt as you showed here, which segues to my thing on prompts. If you guys want to see that, do we have enough time? I can do it in about 10, 15 minutes.
I mean, you're the last speaker. As long as there's people that want to watch you speak, I'm fine with sticking it out.
Okay, sounds great. So let me go back to my prompt that I have here. So if you see my thing, I'll blow this up just for the purposes of visual. So you see my prompt here, it's a nice little home emoji icon. If I go to my projects, it knows that it is that folder, and I'm still in project. I'm still here, but like I don't like seeing this whole long path on my prompt. I like it to be nice and succinct because like when I'm working, I want to do things. So let me go to one of my projects, like let's go to this guy. So now that I'm in here, I have all my Git information if I'm on a master. Now, one thing here you'll notice is that if I'm in Visual Studio Code, and I import the prompt, which I probably have not, if I go to that same folder, you'll notice I don't get the Git information. And the reason is because I have a check in here that if I'm working on something, I have the Git information down here in Visual Studio Code, so I don't want to see it. But if I'm working in the terminal over here, I don't have that context, and so I want to see it. I think I have all kinds of parameter builders here that expand that and add in things like if I'm in Terraform, what Terraform workspace I'm on. The typical kind of stuff that you would see. One other thing that you've probably been seeing is when I type, you probably notice it does this little bit of gray autocomplete. If you're not aware of this, PSReadline has recently added a fish-style auto-completion beta. So it goes into your previous command history and reads what you've done and offers auto-suggestions, just like Google, for your previous commands you've done. So it is super useful. Like when I need to do the same command over and over again, I don't want to type all this out or do H and find it or do up until I find it. I can just start typing what I want to do, like this invoke MS terminal GIF, and I hit write, and now I have that command and run it, which is broken because I have to fix it. Or I can do that, and if it's that, but it's not the most recent one, I want to do something else, I can start it and then do up and find all the commands that have that couple letters in it as they go. I saw you waving, Jeff. Are you okay? You're on mute.
Jeff said good night. And
oh, good night, Jeff. So there you go. You have your that, and you can do all these different things. So if you import modules a bunch, like this is a command I do a lot, IPMO, it'll do it, and it'll go through all your previous PowerShell history to find all the times you did it and ran it. So super useful. To do this, I think it is now actually in the latest PSReadline beta. So if you do install module PSReadline-allow pre-release and import that, I believe it now has this in here. And they're planning to add all kinds of really fancy autocomplete stuff to it beyond just your history. But that's a really nice thing to have. So back to
Just
my
to
prompt.
add on to it, it's also in the new VS Code PowerShell extension. The preview one has it as well.
Yeah, I actually had a script that I made that adds it into my, like you probably saw it was happening in my VS Code. I had to do some fancy stuff to put it in there. But
yeah, but it's public now in the preview version.
Great. Okay, so I don't have to. Thanks, Barb. That saves me the trouble of having to show my ridiculous script I had to make that work. So yeah, so if you have the latest PowerShell preview version, you'll probably get it there too. So that's awesome. So the way that this prompt works, and if I go down to like, I think if I go down real low, it should summarize if I'm like super low in something. I have a thing where like if you get super like deep in something, it'll summarize it with like a ... Anyhow, so the way that this works is this is using a module I have called PowerPrompt, which isn't quite all the way there, but it's pretty good. So the way that PowerPrompt works, if I show the function for my prompt, here I want GC rather. Well, if you didn't notice, if you want to see the source code for any function, this is like a nice quick hand to see it. So this runs this little script I have for my PowerPrompt. So if I go to my PowerPrompt script, which this is just loads in from my profile, blow that up a bit. This is the part where it like throws the bomb, and so it starts this thing that's a PowerPrompt builder, and then it starts adding the things. So like for that get status, it adds, and it just treats. This is actually a special PowerShell class, but you can treat it like a normal array and just add things to it, and it will build the prompt. So this is the long version of it, but I'll show you the short version. So I'm going to do new PowerPrompt builder, and I get this nice object. I'm going to call this my prompt. So I have this, and so my prompt has nothing in it, and there's this thing for the prompt color seed, which I'll get into in a second. So now I want a piece of my prompt. So I'm going to do my prompt plus equals, this is cool. Or let's do first part of prompt. Okay, so now I have that piece in my prompt. Let's see what happens when I convert it to a string. So what this does is the class in the background automatically figures out the prompt, figures out the ANSI codes to write, figures out the special delimiters, and this actually has, I think, does this one have the delimiter adjustment? No, it doesn't yet. I have another version of this where you can customize the delimiter. But actually, it might be, is it in prompt? I haven't worked on this in a while, so I forget my own code. Oh yeah, okay, so you can change it. So I can change this prompt item that I have here. That's my first part of prompt. And I want the background color to be something else. Let's do red. Now my prompt's red. So let's add another piece to this prompt. So I got my prompt, and then I want to add in add in something else to my prompt. Okay. So now I just added that like I would treat a normal array. And I do my string again on that. And look, my prompt automatically builds and figures out all the connection, does all the characters in the background. I'm trying to remember the, I think it's, I think this does it. Yeah, there's a thing you can do where I can show you all the ANSI special coding that makes it those colors. But this thing abstracts all that work away for you. So like when you're making a prompt, you're just adding items to it, and then you can customize as you go. So I can do my prompt, dot prompt, second item that. So there's my second item. This is a thing. Let's do a separator. Put a really ugly separator in there. And so there it is, it adds that separator there. That's the separator that you want after it. So we'll add something else to the prompt. Oh, it's because I specified that one. So there's just some, I got some intelligent stuff in here. And so you can see it didn't detect that separator because it was different and fixed it. So let's start with a new prompt again. And so these actually call in the background a bunch of different commands as well. So you can do pipe it into add power prompt. So that works too. So you can see it changed the separator there at the end if I want to have a pound prompt. And so this default one, when you do it this way, I didn't hard set the seed color. So it sets the colors based on random ones. And it actually has an intelligent thing in here where based on the background color, it intelligently decides whether the front should be black or white, just based on the chroma keys. So this is a really nice way to this is just a framework that also, one thing you'll notice too is it's really, really fast. If you've ever used like PoshGit or any of those other tools for profile customization, you've probably noticed when your prompt comes back, like there's a delay with the prompt because of all the work there. I worked really hard to make this, so it's wicked fast. Like if I do. So, 20 milliseconds, 12 milliseconds, and that's doing this the pipeline way. If you do it the other way, it's even faster because there's inherent delay in doing it this way with the pipeline. So that's a way of building prompts. I'll show a little bit about what the code looks like for that. But this is basically a tool that you can use to build your own prompts, build your own themes, however you want to customize your prompt, but not have to learn all the crazy stuff that's involved in terms of ANSI characters and such like that, because it is really painful, especially when you want to do like these cool like power line separators. Like you have to remember the previous background color and then set it to the foreground color of the next character, and then that one needs to change. So this just abstracts all that ugly, annoying stuff away for you. And I don't know why this is being weird to me. Let's try that again. Oh, I know why. Let me open this up. So this is all done with a PowerShell class. And I just want to, I like to use it as an example of where I think PowerShell classes are best used versus where they're not. Because PowerShell classes have a lot of problems. They have a lot of issues that are tough to work with. But there are some areas where they're really good, and that's in the areas of like input validation and formatting an item. So give me 1 second to just open my folder here. That is not the right folder.
So we got one question.
Sure.
Can you include PowerShell code in your prompt?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, you don't really include PowerShell code in the prompt. You include PowerShell code in the generation of the prompt, and that's how it works when it's doing the normal input. So here, basically, you just put things in parentheses. So like, if I take this same thing, let's do. I'll take the measure command off it. Oh, I gotta know it doesn't like that. There. So you see it inserted that there. If I want to do make it really ugly, yeah, I don't know if it'll work. Let's have some fun with it. Yeah, try it. Let's just take off the separator part here. Yeah, so there you go. You can, you can have all that. Let's do like select first one. So yeah, that gives you the idea, is that you can have all that stuff as part of your prompt. What's a better example? Let's do process name. There you go. Or let's do this a little bit differently. Get process -id. Here's a better example. So there, now you can know you're in PWSH versus PowerShell. I probably don't need the out string on the end. That's what's probably screwing things up. There we go. So yeah, so you can do it, and you can put any kind of code you want in there. So, and when you make your prompt, the prompt is simply just making that your prompt. Function prompt this thing. And now that's my prompt over here. And so you put that in your profile, and you're good to go. So the way that works is just with a class. There's prompt builder and prompt segment. So the prompt segment does all that work of figuring out how to put that together. And the prompt builder starts with the constructor and then has the methods for add, remove. And then there's things OP addition and OP subtraction. These are static methods you can add to a class to override those typical array actions that you're used to, like doing plus equals, plus. You can actually build those into your own custom class and make them work. So this one just does a custom thing, which takes the left and adds it to the right, which uses this add, which does the add. And the functions for that are over here in terms of the actual work that it does, in terms of add power prompt, get Terraform status, that kind of thing. So again, it's not that complicated of a class. It just defines the basic property. It stores its information in itself so that it can stay persistent, as well as that prompt color seed, and just has the construction information as well as these special things that allow you to use that shorthand syntax as opposed to having to do dot add and dot subtract. And then here's the really fancy stuff, is the toString. This is what does all the work to get it all cleaned up, does all the separator, figuring out the colors, generating the random. Here's that random set seed. If you don't use the seed of 0, this is the best randomized source I could pick that works cross-platform, which is basically just get the current date time in milliseconds and just get the millisecond. So like, it's not the greatest randomizing, but it's good enough for the dumb application that this is. And that's how it just sets that seed. And that's pretty much it. The rest of these are just things to build it. So this is what does all that additional work as well as some private functions that do all the really ugly stuff, like the ANSI RGB things, all the different glyphs that are available, getting Unicode characters. So this is all the ugly stuff that I killed myself on figuring out how to work so that you don't have to. But if you want to see how it all works and how it emits all those special characters, you can look at all this in here. And this is on my GitHub. It's github.com/Justin Grote PowerCD, or Power Prompt, excuse me. I think there's a preview module out on PowerShell Gallery, but I don't know if it's full there, but you can always download it. And just all my modules are built so that you can just import module on this and run it as a source module, and it should work. No guarantee there. Yeah, so that module's here. just kind of a neat thing. But yeah, that's how my prompt works. So I did all that work up front, but now when I work on my prompt, I mean, my actual prompt is fairly straightforward, as you saw there in my profile. So I think that about covers it. The main areas here that I wanted to emphasize was that, again, where you work and how you do it really affects your productivity. And having things like color highlighting, these indent rainbows, automatic formatting, format on save, which you can do in VS Code, which we can do as a separate thing later. It really impacts how you work. And the more you, these are kind of creature comforts and fun things, but they also really impact your productivity. I mean, for me, having these contextual things, having these contextual information helps prevent you from making mistakes just with a simple visual cue. So thanks very much, and I'll go ahead and open the floor to questions as well as general discussion.
Are there still any questions? We have a smaller group left, so feel free to unmute if you can.
I am always searching for new extensions with it for Visual Studio Code, and I like the rainbow thing you mentioned. What else do you have for tips for us?
Sure, great question. Let's go down the line. So most of these are going to be kind of more specialized, specific, better aligned. This one is great for PowerShell. Let's say you're working on something and you do, I really like it for splatting. Let's do, what's a good splat to do? Let's do get content. Get content params, path, raw. So if you have this, if I do align, see how it automatically aligned the equals in that and made it look really nice? Yeah. This works with anything. It works with JSON. It works with, it intelligently detects a lot of these kind of things and does that really good alignment. Let me see if I can, it should work on the terminal settings one.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is super useful. And I have actually a format on save that auto aligns all that kind of stuff. So especially if you have really long ones. I think actually a good example would be the JSON file that's in the power config or the MS terminal settings, because that one's a mess. Let me find it here. Okay, so here you go. So you got this example here. Take this, align, and I have it bound to a key for Control-Shift-A. So if I'm working on something like this, I have a JSON like this, Control-Shift-A, aligns it. You know, stuff like this, Control-Shift-A, aligns it. This stuff, Control-Shift-A, aligns it. Do the whole freaking thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it works really well with kind of very discrete property sets.
And increases the readability.
Yeah, it really helps with the readability. Really helps teams to do it. It has all kinds of configurations in terms of if you want more padding, if you want more spaces, how far in do you want the initial indent to be. Yeah, really helpful for that kind of thing.
Cool.
Let's see. So let's go down the list. I like this one because it fixes the function keyword that I hate, but it's also a good example of how you can customize the syntax highlighters and be additive to them with your own extensions. Bracket pair colorizer is a super helpful one. You've probably noticed that my brackets all line up here. The JSON is a great example. See how all the colors, the color here matches that, the color here matches that, this matches that. It draws these little lines so that it ties them together. Very helpful when you're working on super nested stuff like this. Very helpful to find errors. If you screw one up, you see where it highlights red here, so it's really easy to find. I mean, 99% of my time in PowerShell before I had this thing was chasing down stupid brackets that I missed, trying to figure out where the heck I missed this bracket, or I put a parentheses, because the PowerShell, you know, the PowerShell reports are usually not helpful. They're just like, made it to the end of the file and was missing that thing. Okay, well, where in this 5,000 line script did I miss that one parenthesis? Little things like that. And again, totally agnostic, works on JSON, PowerShell, TypeScript, whatever. Super useful. Code tours, I won't go too much into that. But this is kind of a nifty thing to do demos. GistPad, love GistPad. So GistPad if you use GitHub GIS, if you're not familiar with what GitHub GIS are, they're basically little tiny mini repositories that are great for like little one-off things. And mine is a pretty good treasure trove of stuff. Definitely recommend checking mine out, which is Justin Grote. So these are things that are just like sort of like one-off things, like, you know, little snippets and stuff that you can write, but each one of them is their own one-off Git repository, and people can add comments, you can do it, you can collaborate, you can download it, you can make cool little short things. I have all kinds of in here that are neat. But what this does is this takes this functionality and ties it into VS Code. So if you look at my file map, down here is a thing for gists, and so it logs in using my GitHub, which again is on my demo, so I'm gonna have to do this real quick, probably. I just gotta activate it. Well, bad demo because I'm on my demo thing and I haven't set it up. But basically it'll list all your gists here. You can open them, edit them, change them on the fly, and when you hit save, it'll save it directly back to the gist. Really nice one if you want it. Really good for prototyping, testing, sharing code. Really helpful. Git graph is awesome if you're in a repository. Where am I? Power config. This one will probably have a good one.
Already have as well.
Yeah. So for those who haven't seen Git graph, if you're in a repository with a graph, man, none of my stuff wants to work today. Do a reload. Basically shows you a visual representation of your repository and how everything is laid out and split out. I have this as my base folder. That might not be. That might be why it's not working.
There it is.
There we go. So this, I mean, this is a really simple repository, but if you have different branches as well as you're tracking a remote branch, really easy to see, like when you really get in the weeds, to like clean up your repository and see what's going on. And you can go back to previous versions, see what changed in them. Basically a really handy interface to Git, in addition to Git Lens, which adds a lot of things. One thing you might have seen is like when I'm going to individual lines of my code here, there's like an immediate blame that gets added to everything. So if I click here, I'm like, what idiot made this change? Oh, I did 5 months ago in this change.
Yeah, know the feeling.
So, yeah, great for working in teams, but also great for yourself, just being like, why did I add that? And so you can go back and look at it and see all the details of your commit, and hopefully this is, you use good commit reasons, and etc. And it's got all kinds of stuff built in really nicely into the file menu in terms of like looking at past files, looking at your file timeline, comparing to others. To-do tree is one that I like a lot. Let's see. So to-do tree, if you add to-dos into your, you just add code, you just do :to-do or :fix me, and it automatically tracks them. And so you can come down here and your to-dos. And so when I get down here, like a bunch of stuff I got to still do on this one, like, you know, this separator matcher sucks. Don't forget to come back and fix that. Don't forget to remove this because it's crappy code, that kind of thing. Really handy for like kind of doing many things without having to track them as issues, especially when you're like working locally before you publish your code to somebody. And again,
this was,
you know,
all
I'm writing
in
PowerShell
GitHub.
modules here. I'm writing PowerShell modules here. All this stuff is totally relevant if you're just writing a PowerShell script, or you're just writing something very simple that is a tool for somebody to use. It doesn't have to be fancy PowerShell modules with all this crap. It can be one file in a repository with scripts that you share for somebody else. All this stuff is super helpful and a great reason to start using Visual Studio Code over things like ISE. Markdown all-in-one, great Markdown preview. Peacock, this one's kind of neat. I use this when I work on a lot of customer environments. I work for an MSP, and so I work in different areas. And so a lot of time when I'm working on different projects, I want to have different VS Code windows for different things. Just like how I have like my administrator, my other one, I want to have a nice visual indicator of what I'm working on. And so this may or may not work because I haven't changed anything here, but yeah, what does it not like? Now it's because I'm in a folder that doesn't have workspace settings. Because my workspace settings in this one probably suck. Yeah, it's probably broken. All right, fine. Let me just delete it for now, just for fun. And so it will automatically add a boundary and everything to your window that you're working on based on whatever color you want. You can set it in the workspace settings. So for one customer, I might have blue, another customer might have purple, another customer I might have yellow. So when I'm working during the day and I'm context switching between different issues I got to fix, it's really easy to just grab the window that I was working on. You know, real similar concept like if you use profiles in Chrome or Microsoft Edge, where you can have different profiles with different themes based on different people. Really handy way to work through different things. And if you work for one company too, it's a great way to separate like this project you're working on versus this project you're working on and have a nice visual cue. PowerShell preview, obviously, like preview builds are pretty, man, Tyler really killed it with this. He had to take a code base that was, you know, it was a good code base, but it was built a different way and basically completely rewrite it. So big shout out to Tyler on this, that he put in a ton of work to get this to work, and him and the team to get PowerShell Editor Services to work. And the new version is so great, and I'm really looking forward to a lot of the changes that'll come there, and hopefully be able to contribute some stuff myself now that I know how to build VS Code extensions, thanks to the previous presentation.
I like the command history in debug mode when the normal PowerShell doesn't do that because of the PSReadline thing, but the PowerShell preview does that correctly.
For which, sorry?
If you're running a script in debug mode, the step by step, and you go to the terminal, then you cannot use the arrow keys to go through your command history.
Certainly. So as far as the PSReadline aspect of it, PSReadline is now in the stable version. So actually, if you use the stable version now, it's the quote unquote good one. So if you haven't updated lately, the PowerShell stable is now the new good one. It's the new refactored one built on C#. The preview just has net new stuff. And it used to be, we'd always say is like, don't use always use preview. Was like, I had to hammer it into all my coworkers. Even though it's preview, it's better than what the main one is. Now that code has rolled back into the stable. So now you can use the stable or the preview. They're both equally good. The preview will just have new stuff.
Good to know. Try it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to go too much into the remoting stuff, but this stuff is such a game changer. I mean, I have a VS Code window that is running headless on a server that is in Australia that I'm fixing a code for, and I don't have to do it through an RDP window on PowerShell ISE. It's absolutely amazing. Being able to work in a container and build a dev environment in a container and have it just look like it's on my local desktop. If you haven't seen any of the VS Code remote development stuff, it is wizardry and magic. I don't know how they do it, but it is super rad. I'm not going to go into it now too because it'll take me an hour. I'll spend an hour on it because it's so cool. But definitely check that out, and it's totally applicable to PowerShell. It's amazing. Sort JSON objects. This one's great. You can take a thing that's got all kinds of crap all over the place and choose sort JSON. And you can sort all these different ways: type, value, reverse, alphanumeric, and it'll sort the entire JSON that way. I already sorted this one alphanumeric, but let's say I want to sort it by key length. It'll automatically do all the sorting of the JSON and make it look nice. Like super useful if you're working a lot of JSON stuff. Really, really great for like ARM templates when you're like organizing ARM templates and building them. VS Code icons, just to make some of the icons fancy. I like my fancy icons. One thing is that you can customize these icons in the settings and tasks. So like, for instance, my, I don't know if it'll show here, but see how like my pester tests have this special icon on them? This is not default. I added a little thing to make that work. So that all my pester tests have a cute little icon. And again, this is the thing, like, it seems like it's just a cutesy thing, but it really makes a difference when you're going through here and you're looking at these things and you're seeing your module file versus this. It makes you more productive because you can just visually go straight to that thing without looking at it. You know, if I turn off the icons, these toggle icons.
Yeah, otherwise you have to look at the extension of the file.
Yeah, you have to read the text. You have to figure it out. Yep. I don't know. It's in here somewhere. But basically, you know, like, it does make a difference. Having these nice green check marks versus the warning fires that are the things that I need to fix right away before I merge the code. You know, all that stuff is super useful. And again, all that stuff applies regardless of what you're doing. This used to be the way that I would sync to other customers and such. If you're running the Insiders version, you may see this. You can now do settings sync with the Insiders version, which is that you sign up with your Microsoft account or GitHub account, and then all your VS Code settings will sync between all your computers wherever you use them. This VS Code actually runs out of a folder on my desktop. You can't see it here, but I'll open it up here. If you don't know, you can run VS Code without installing it. You just download the zip and create a data folder in there, and it will save all your settings and extensions in there. And now you have a portable VS Code that has all your settings and everything. You can put it in a zip, take it wherever you need. I have a version that daily uploads this to a place. So when I'm working on a customer system, I can just download the zip and run it and use it on a customer system without admin rights, without needing to install it, without leaving any cruft and then delete it afterwards. Super useful, super nice, makes it very, very portable. But Settings Sync works with this too, where basically what it'll do is synchronize your settings with a Microsoft account or GitHub account, and then every other computer you have will just get those settings. So when I first fired this up this morning after I rebuilt it, it had the default settings where this bar is over here. It didn't have any of my extensions already built in. All I did was go to the Settings Sync, sign in, click it, and then it downloaded and synced all my settings. And it's super customizable. You can say what settings you want to sync. You might have certain settings like my PowerShell executable paths that I don't want to sync. I want that to stay local. All that stuff is super configurable. Definitely worth checking out. You just go here and the preferences sync, and you have all the settings and can configure it and all that good stuff. Super easy to use. It will show up in stable eventually, but it's in insiders right now. Let's see what else. YAML's great. This is it just adds YAML support. So if you're working with anything with YAML, I really like YAML. Like I find YAML much easier to work with than like JSON and any files and etc. To the point where like when I write ARM templates, I actually write them in YAML and then convert them to JSON, because you can use JSON schemas to validate YAML. If you want to, you do the same thing with this terminal settings thing. Is you could write it as a YAML file. In fact, it might let me convert it if it's not completely screwed up. Well, let me do this. Let me just take this terminal settings schema. There's plenty of online JSON to YAML converters. Oh, it's because it's a schema. That's why I want my settings. Give me 1 second. Pull up my VS Code settings here. There we go. Okay, so we'll take this. So I just went to the site, JSON to YAML, convert it to YAML. Even though you can do this in VS Code, it's just not working for me right now. But like to me, and make sure I set this to the right format, YAML. To me, this, let me make it, come on. Like this format is so much easier to read and work with and screw with the settings than this mess. And you know, all the align stuff works here too. Format document, align. Now everything's nicely aligned and pretty. Like I find this so much easier to work with, and like the tab indentation versus all this extra stuff that's in JSON. And like, you know, I've been doing JSON enough that I can read this, but I much prefer working in YAML. But YAML and JSON are equivalent. So you can write a YAML, make changes, edit it, and one of the things I have like as a format on save is just convert it back to JSON. So that's one nice thing that I have that I do with that. I think that's most, like I have some others. I don't think there's anything really crazy. I can look at my other system here, but those are the main ones. Like just those few, definitely like indent rainbow, align, git graph, git lens, gistpad. Excel viewer is nice. It lets you view Excel files without having to open them in Excel. But like those main ones, like the align and of course the PowerShell extension. Zip File Explorer lets you view a zip file in the tree over here without having to open it or view it in Explorer. Just a nice little shortcut because I'm constantly opening like NuGet packages that I've generated to see if the files are right.
I'm missing the CSV rainbow. I use that also many.
CSV rainbow, does that like align the columns or
it
something?
It will colorize it per, so you can see which column it is.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. Okay, oh, I see. It syntax highlights it for the CSV. That's cool.
Yeah, because normal you see a CSV and then, what's the heck I'm in which column?
Yeah, no, that's super useful. I'm always like taking my CSVs and just piping them into like Outgrid view and stuff.
Yeah, okay.
That's cool though. I learned one today too, so thumbs up for that. Thank you.
I guess there are many extensions out there that we don't know of or didn't try it yet, but
yeah, oh, there's a ton, and like these are the ones that are the most useful to me. And I'm always like, just every week or so, I just Google and try to find if there's new like top VS Code extensions or VS Code extensions you should be using, and they're all TypeScript extensions that I'm just like, I don't care. But every once in a while I come across a good gem, like the GistPad. I was using another tool that was way worse, but GistPad isn't like this has only been around a little bit, and it doesn't have that many shares, but it's done by the LiveShare team, and it is super good, super polished. The GitHub extension is really good. If you do a lot of pull requests, you can do all the pull request management inside. The Azure Repos one, not so much. I wish the Azure Repos team would make theirs as good as the GitHub one. That would be awesome, because I do a ton of Azure Repos, pull requests, and issue management and such. But yeah, that's another really good one.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think what else. I mean, some of them are great, some of them are okay, but they can always be improved. You can make your own custom ones. Like I said, like this one was just the same PowerShell syntax highlighting, but better. And I just set it so that it overrides what's in the PowerShell preview. The only other thing I say about Visual Studio Code is the Visual Studio Online, where it runs Visual Studio Code in a web browser, is really neat. And it's a full version of Visual Studio Code. You can do live share, where you can be working on your local Visual Studio Code and bring someone in through a web browser for code review. And it's like, if you've ever done any like Excel or Word co-authoring in Office 365, where you see their cursor and you're doing yours, like that stuff's really cool too. And it's especially good in that they have a way you can put it on an agent and fire it up for debug. So one of my little side projects that I want to do is in a CI pipeline like Azure DevOps, if it hits an error, fire up that special agent, register it with my account, and tie me into where it was debugged, so that I can actually debug an Azure DevOps pipeline or a GitHub Actions pipeline, versus the horrendous process that we have to do today of test it, wait 2 minutes, oh, it didn't work, test it, wait 2 minutes, okay, put in this message to see if it was there, as opposed to doing a proper debug process.
That's cool.
Yeah, so definitely check
You
that out.
use also some spell checker. I do for my blog, write it in Markdown. And I use now Grammarly, and I looked at spell right. But, yeah.
Yeah, but if you haven't seen this, definitely check it out. I mean, you can just go right here. You can just try it. You sign in, you do all the whatever. Again, I'm on my dev account, so I don't have any of this stuff set up. Let me try my. Yeah. Come on, number 26. Oh, you know you want to show up. Come on, where are you? There you are. I gotta go through all this crap. I forgot about that. Never mind. Anyhow, it has a really nice thing. That part is free, and you can have this nice browser-based editor, and it works with the live share of multiple people working in the same code at the same time.
Yep.
So that would be another extension that I don't have on here, but I would generally recommend is the live share extension. Check that out. Now, obviously, by the downloads, it's pretty popular. So.
One of the other features of live share is also that they have other things. So I've used in the past with like connecting with like Discord or other things. So then, or just any other web and Zoom. And so then I can we can work together and use video conferencing to talk and see each other, but then also use VS Code to edit each other's code. It's been really beneficial.
Yeah, it's super awesome for code reviews or pair programming if you do any of that kind of stuff. Okay, well, I guess we'll just turn it back over to general chat now. Again, those are the extensions that I use. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. I know it's a lot. I'm always good at spending way more time than I need, but worst thing you can do is give me an open runway. So.
Thanks for sharing.
We're very happy to have had you here as a speaker. Thank you for taking the time and going in depth. That's something we always appreciate. So thank you very much, Justin. Yeah, and other than that, officially we actually had scheduled to also have a community discussion. I'll leave this room open for people, but I unfortunately fortunately get to walk my dog, so I'll go do that now. But feel free to stick around, and if there's still people in here after I come back, I'll be happy to have a chat. A big thank you to the speakers, Justin, Thomas. I know you guys do this in your spare time, so it's very much appreciated. Also, thanks to Barbara for moderating and helping me out with anything I missed in the chat. So thank you, Barbara. Good job. And I hope this was useful for everyone. We already have the next edition planned. That one's coming up on, let's see, I think it was the 21st of May. So a little bit over a month before the next one comes. But it will be announced on Twitter, and I'll throw it in the Slack, and also the proper Slack with the Dutch channel that Thomas shared. So hope to see you at BridsConf if anyone here is joining, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.